Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name's Scyushi, and today I'm going to finally have that dedicated video that I've been mentioning in all of my streams where we tear apart the Necromancer, aka the Witch. Just before we get started, I want to lay out a little bit of a cushion to fall back on here by stating that I absolutely love Path of Exile 2, and I have been using the Witch for roughly 200 hours. I've been able to make a competent minion build that can handle pretty much everything at the end game. I haven't found enough Citadel bosses on my stupid maps to be able to truly test the range of the damage of this build. But suffice to say, all of my friends that are spellcasters or monks or mercenaries or whatever are just clearing so much faster because minions kinda suck. Where this video is coming from is more so tough love, because Jonathan, the lead developer, stated that they were trying to make the best Necromancer in any ARPG, any Diablo-Like. And unfortunately, I can say that equivocally, this is the worst Necromancer I've ever experienced in this genre. It's worse than Diablo 2, 3, 4, and I think that the crown of best Necromancer goes to Last Epoch. I'll get into why by deep diving into the various abilities of this class. But before we get into minions, I wanted to pick apart Corpse Explosion. This is an ability from Diablo 2 that's like 25 years old at this point. It was never a fun ability. No Necromancers ever liked using it, but it just had such crazy damage scaling that we were all kind of forced to. The problem is that in order to use this ability, you need to have a corpse, or what I like to refer to as an ability that requires a battery. You need to have product 1 in order to have product 2 actually have its function. Why this becomes a problem is because when you start fighting a boss that doesn't have any adds, suddenly your Corpse Explosion doesn't do anything. Path of Exile's solution to this is giving you a skill gem about halfway through the campaign that allows you to sacrifice your minions and use them as a corpse generator. I was actually able to make a pretty functional Corpse Explosion build for endgame because Corpse Explosion scales off of the health of whatever thing is being destroyed. But the funny thing is that Diablo 4, a game that people notoriously hate on, had a much better solution to this corpse generation problem in that one of your basic attacks could cleave a corpse off of enemies, thus making the build viable for bosses. And this is a great encapsulation of this class, and unfortunately, these developers, they're stuck in the past. They're trying to make all of this content work in a game in 2025 with mechanics that are dated from 25 years ago. But okay, let's talk about minions and why they suck. Lots of players have the impression that minions will scale off of your stats or scale off of something in the skill tree. They don't. The only things that your minions scale off of is nodes in the skill tree specifically for minions, and we'll get into that, plus to minion level on your gear, and anything that boosts ally gets X when nearby. The only exception to this is there's a few uniques that specifically buff minions, but none of them in a meaningful way. This already, I feel, is a fundamental problem with this class, because by having your minions not scale off of anything that the player has, it means that minions cap off about here, while players can just kind of keep going because the further you get in the game, you get better and better gear. Gear as a whole doesn't really buff your minions that much because there's a limited amount of gear that can even give plus to minion level. And then otherwise, the entirety of your kit is set around the skill gem and the support gems. The other reason why minions don't scale nearly as high as players do is because players can have reactive skills, stuff that procs off of crit, frost, ignite. Your minions don't have any of these benefits. And in fact, the crazy thing is that your stats being completely separate from minions means that if you get anything that gives you to ignite in the skill tree, that is helping you, the player, not your minions. Because of this, I can't help but feel like you are directly competing for skill tree nodes. If you want to make a minion build work, you basically have to sacrifice everything to make them even barely functional. And are any of the skill tree nodes worthwhile for minions? God no, it's like 10% more damage, 10% more health. It's boring. Why don't we have a node that just makes all of my minions do frost damage or something? Or a node that makes them scale off of a percentage of my stats? Or better yet, just remove all the minion nodes entirely and make them scale off my stats. It's almost like you could just remove all those minion nodes as a whole, and guess what? It would actually be better for it. Why does this have me so heated? Why do you say that the skill tree is worthless, you stupid man? Because the minions only really scale off of your support gems, and you have a limited amount of support gems gems that you can put on each of the minions. This basically means that the only way that you can systematically make them have a huge power boost is when you inevitably unlock more slots for their support gems. But even then, there's very limited support gems that actually help your minions overall. Like you could put a bunch of support gems that make a fire minion type actually ignite enemies, and then you could have another ability on your shock mages that makes it so that, oh, when shock triggers on an ignited enemy, they no longer lose the shock. But that's a singular support gem that you have to waste a slot on, and so I just can't really justify it. In my opinion, the only support gems that you should prioritize with this stupid class is damage, damage, and more damage. The current build that I'm rocking for my minions right now doesn't have any health to my minions, and they already have such incredible survivability. I don't even know why it's a thing that you can get on the skill tree. But so many of the support gems are about trying to make your minions survive longer, and that's just so worthless to me. The only node that I think everybody always goes for is the one that boosts your minions' movement speed, which I think should just be removed. Like there shouldn't be a cap on minion movement speed. Let's combine this with Command Skeleton, which is telling your units, hey, go over there. In Path of Exile, this is more like Skeleton Suggestion, like, hey, can you guys go and attack that guy that's kind of killing me right now? No, I'm busy fighting this other dude right now. But you wanna know what Diablo 4 does? When you use Command Skeleton, it forces all of your minions to almost teleport, to charge towards the creature that you told them to fight. They also get a little bit of a damage boost when they do it. So it's not just a worthless ability wasting a slot on your hotbar. And that's another thing. So many of the active abilities for your minions are pretty worthless. I'm not talking about like the damage that they do, but the fact that you have to do a cast animation in order to tell your minions, "Ma, do this spell." Like it should be something that makes the minion glow for a minute before they use their ability or something, or should just be insta-cast. I know that the reason they did this is because they wanted an excuse to have cast speed actually be a worthwhile stat for a Necromancer, but in a game where the entire end game is designed around pressing one button and having everything die, having your character constantly casting in order to use all of your minion abilities, you wanna know what that makes me do? It makes me not use my minion abilities, especially because the only way that you can make your minions viable is by using the goddamn curses. Curses, 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 oh my lord. Why are curses still in these games? Like, I get that it's like a staple hold of this type of class to use a sort of debuff, but the fact that the entire class is built around curses being their primary source of damage is just stupid. I should be able to do as much damage as anybody else, and the curse should just make me do more damage than everybody else. That's the advantage of a curse. But I feel like the entire class is just gimped around the idea that you have to use these things to buff, to battery your minions. Not only just a curse of like, oh, this makes enemies more susceptible to fire damage, but there's also that stupid one that spikes up through your minions and gives a buff to the ones in the surrounding area. The spikes that don't move, requiring you to be stationary in order for your minions to see the highest benefit in a game where you are trying to move as fast as possible through the end game maps, meaning that the only way that you can ever see your minions do the highest amount of damage possible is when you're fighting a stationary boss. Because let's dial it back for a minute here and let's call it like it is. Minions are basically sorcerer spells, but they home in on things. Spells with extra steps. Because of all of these problems, them not listening to your commands, needing to have all of these different buffs around them, it means that no matter how powerful you end up making them, they kind of just all spread off in their own direction. And one of the biggest problems that we've all been facing is the body blocking of the minions. A really cheap, lazy solution that would solve a lot of problems with minions right now is if they just made their hitboxes really, really tiny. Minions having their hitboxes as fat as they are makes it so that a lot of them are pretty worthless when it comes to large groups of enemies and particularly bosses. Because let's say you have like 20 skeletal minions. Honestly, it's pretty worthless because they're just gonna bottleneck and block each other. And even if a boss shows up that's like a really chonky boy that your minions can surround, chances are they're going to end up body blocking a bunch of them out from getting close enough to the boss. If their hitboxes were severely reduced, it would allow more of them not only to travel through tight corridors, but also to surround enemies better. This in turn would make the damage actually a little bit better, because in most cases, half of your damage is off over on the side kicking rocks. The quick, easy way that I think they could resolve a lot of problems with this class currently, in its current state, would be to remove minion movement speed so that they just dash towards everything, make them smarter, and actually listen to my commands of, hey, go attack that guy. And they also need to either scale off of the player or be able to equip gear. Again, I think a quick solution would be to have some sort of stupid unique that would make them scale off of your damage stats or something, because funny enough, there are some uniques that make your minions scale off of your stats, but it's all about their survivability, and as we've discussed previously, survivability is not a problem with my goddamn minions. I need them to kill things. But let's talk about something personal here. Let's talk about how this class could have actually been the next generation of summoner / necromancer. For starters, why skeletons? Why not like blood minions or something different? Just because Diablo 2 did skeletons doesn't mean they always have to use skeletons as a necromancer. I know it's got to do with the undead, but there's all sorts of other options for that rather than just skelly boys. The other thing too that I think a lot of people complain about that don't really understand, oh, why do you even like playing minions? It's so boring, you don't do anything, it's passive gameplay. That's because game developers are stupid and don't know how to make a summoner class active gameplay. Like, rather than having a bunch of different active skills that I can cast with my minions, like, do frost. Why aren't I pressing buttons to command my minions in various ways? Not only just telling them go attack this, but maybe I could press a button saying, hey, come and guard me. It could be like almost an active attack button where you're utilizing your minions for all of your attacks. Last Epoch actually kind of does this with one of your very basic attacks being that you can throw out phantoms that will end up homing in on whatever you're targeting. But I'm talking about something a little bit better. Like, let's step it up. Let's really theory craft about what this class's potential could be if the developers had ideas that weren't 25 years old. Why don't I get to choose what type of minions I have? And I'm not talking about warriors, brutes, whatever. I'm talking about I should be able to choose, okay, I want some phalanx. I want some dudes that got shields. I can command them to surround me, and then I can use an explosive spell to knock them out and stun enemies nearby. But I could also change their behavior so that they instead get in front of me as a shield instead of surrounding me, thus allowing me to explode and push them all in one specific direction. But maybe I decide to have a couple archers along the way, and they specifically try to stay at the back while the soldier boys are at the front blocking everything. Maybe even have some spear boys that get behind the phalanx or something. I don't know. The fact is that I think the reason why Necromancer appeals to so many people is it's very similar to an RTS game. Or at least it should be, but more active. The desire isn't to simply watch your minions kill everything, it's to command them to kill everything for you. There's something just inherently badass about being like the commander on the battlefield, all fat and jolly, like, go kill this man. But unfortunately, that fantasy has never truly been realized in any necromancer in this genre. And again, all of this comes out of love, because I want this game to be better. I want this necromancer to be better. But unfortunately, I think that it's just so fundamentally flawed and stuck in old ideas that Blizzard had years ago that Path of Exile is still ripping off. Like, I know the POE community is probably gonna tear me a new one, but frankly speaking, I think that a lot of you guys don't really give Diablo enough credit. Jonathan himself, the lead developer, is constantly prattling on about his experiences with Diablo 2 and how they just wanted to make a better version of Diablo 2. And they've done that with Path of Exile 1. Path of Exile 2, I feel like, is lightning in a bottle that the developers don't know they have. While the campaign and the acts are like so stupendously polished, the end game kind of just relies on their old POE1 garbage. And this is where a lot of these problems end up coming from, because through the campaign, you can kind of just use whatever minions you want and it's a ton of fun. But once you get to the end game, it's all about having the fastest clear time possible, and minions are just not adequate. Unfortunately for all of us necromains, this is a class that is inherently complex as hell to make, let alone get right. And unfortunately, right now, this class is not right. I've used a lot of the other minion builds that some of the top creators have made, these high-rated ones that have like really good clear time and stuff. And frankly speaking, my friend who's a sorcerer outclears me every time. Yes, the sorcerer is a lot more squishy and is kind of glassy, but I don't have the option of being glassy in order to make my minions stronger. Therein lies the problem. You have to give yourself some survivability because your minions aren't strong enough to kill things fast enough before they kill you. Now, a lot of this might be swept under the rug in favor of, oh, this game is early access right now, and we don't even have specters and stuff like that. There might be some big brain picture going on here that the developers know with the minions that is systematically going to make them so much better later on in its development. But I am honestly a bit disappointed at the general lack of original ideas with minions. I was really hoping to see something fresh and new, like built from the ground up instead of just ripping off Diablo 2 again. Whether or not you end up agreeing with me or not is kind of irrelevant because frankly speaking, this is just a rant video from someone who has always passionately used the Necromancer as a main up to a point. Because the Necromancer has always sucked at the end game. It's a class that, for whatever reason, developers always make you sacrifice your minions as a battery to make yourself stronger rather than the other way around. With that said, you can still tear me apart in the comments if you want to. Maybe you have some other suggestions of issues that you had with the class. There's so many different things that I didn't touch upon today because I wasn't really following a script. But regardless, I hope you found this video in some way, shape, or form entertaining to say the least. And I do hope that some of these complaints don't fall on deaf ears because I think that the developers need to seriously do a lot better. The developers have this almost elitist mentality that copying features that Diablo's done is lazy, when the entirety of Path of Exile owes its identity to Diablo, and Diablo has already solved a lot of these problems years and years and years ago. The only reason I feel that the developers need to get their ego in check is when you see them in interviews responding to the community and kind of having this idea that, oh, we know the game better than you guys. I'm really hoping that all of these problems will be resolved with a simple minion-based ascendancy. Because we still don't have the third ascendancy for the Witch. And as of right now, both Infernalist and Blood Mage just make the Necromancer a crappier sorcerer. With all that said, I think I could just be here all day rambling about this, so I think we should just call it. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe for more. I am going to make more of these ranty videos. Most of all, I want to talk about the end game. I really want to tear into that one. But I do hope that you found this video coherent. Yeah, I'll say that. Because I know I was just kind of going off about all these things, but I just find this class so aggravatingly lame. It's got all the ingredients to be something special, but it's not because it's just ripping off mechanics from other games rather than having its own ideas. Swapping out your minions on the fly is cool up until you get to the end game and then you're stuck using like one minion type because it's the only one that scales off of one specific damage type. There's a reason you'll see anyone who rocks minions utilizing just one minion. And that I feel defeats the entire purpose of the class, which is to have a varied army for every situation.